name is NKECHI Abuh, and I'm just going to be interacting with you on the code of conduct for election observers, specifically INEC expectations from election observation. Having been accredited as observers in this election, the 2023 general election, what are we looking at? What is the commission looking at from you? What are we expecting from you? Now, I have also noted from the very beginning that NBA has been part of the electoral process over time. And so you've been in the process of observing election, general election, off-cycle elections. So this is just like the president and Mr. Otta had said earlier on, rubbing our minds together, reminding ourselves of what we have been doing and just seeing how we can do it better. So once again, I welcome all of us to this little time we have this conversation. I'm starting with the learning objective for this conversation. For every learning process like this, we always set out an objective to achieve so that at the end of this little time we're spending together, we'll reappraise and see whether we've achieved these objectives. And so for this conversation, we have just 3 objectives set out for us. The first one is that at the end of this conversation, we all will have been able to list the roles and responsibilities of an election observer that you are. And then we should be able to state the essential issues in the election observation. And lastly, we should be able to list the elements of INEC regulations and processes for election observation. So these 3 objectives were set to achieve as we move on. So introduction. I think the president and Mr. Otta had actually taken my introduction. They've already told us what election observation is and what it's set to achieve. So I'll just run through my introduction here. I just started by saying that election observation is a valuable tool for improving the quality of election. Okay, so just like we have said earlier on, and then, of course, I don't need to overemphasize this because that it speaks for itself, is that without election observation, we will not have been able to reach the heights we've reached as a commission now, because a lot of what you see as improvements in the electoral process come from recommendations submitted to the commission from election observers who have gone out to the field. So it goes without saying that it is a valuable tool towards improving the quality of elections. And then we said that the conduct of election is particularly enhanced by an effective interaction between the commission and observer groups. And of course, you bear with me that the commission has always had this continuous quarterly interactive sessions with CSOs and particularly observer groups, rubbing minds together, all towards seeing how we can improve the electoral process. So it enhances effective interaction between the commission and observer groups. And then we want to particularly note that the commission as an EMB actually needs monitors. The commission needs monitors that will report back to us and appraise us and let us know how far we have fared with the preparations we've done, with the conduct of the elections. So as election observers, you are monitors for the activities of the commission in the conduct of this election. And you are meant to get whatever gaps we have or we might have, and of course, help us recommend how we get them filled up. So we see that as observers, we are actually looking up to, the commission is actually looking up to you to come back to us and help us fill whatever gaps you might have noticed during the conduct of election. And then finally, we're saying that observers are not to sit in judgment. This is very, very important to us, and it's to us in the commission, because we know you are all lawyers, and we are careful not to be judged by you at the end of the day. So we're saying that we're having this conversation to say that while you are in the field, you are not actually sitting in judgment over the commission, but we're expecting you to provide unbiased and forthright assessment of the conduct of the election, and of course, profile concrete solutions to observe lapses. So it's not for you to, at the end of the day, come say, oh, this commission has done this, that commission has not done this well. Yes, you tell us what we do, but please do not crucify us at the end of the day. It is a learning process. We have always told ourselves that the biggest room in the world is a room for improvement. And so we expect that whatever you're going to come up with, whatever recommendation you're going to come up with at the end of the day will help us move forward and improve our processes. So we just start by saying it's taking for knowing that we all know who an observer is, but because we're having this conversation, I just have us look at it again. Who is an observer? We all know an observer is a person that is sponsored by an organization that was accredited by an EMB like INEC to observe election within the standards and guidelines put in place by the commission and in line with international best practices and standards. We're just trying to say that no one person can just stand up and go to the field and be an observer. If you are going to be an observer in an election, you must be sponsored by an organization. Of course, like yours, MBA is sponsoring you, and that organization, like MBA, must have been accredited by INEC for this election. You see that before now, you can go to the field, you see some persons wearing tags of previous elections, and some persons will tell you, oh, we are accredited in previous elections. But no, for every election, there is always an accreditation process undergone by interested observer groups. And so for you to be in the field, you must belong to one of these groups that must have been accredited in this general election. And what are we to do as an observer? You are there to check the processes and then be able to ascertain whether the commission acted within our guidelines and within international best practices. Okay, so having seen who an observer is, we're going to be asking ourselves, what is election observation? This also, I know, is taken for granted because we already know from Mr. Ota and the president this morning, they've told us what election observation is. So I will just run through this again. All right. I hope you're hearing me. Sorry, I didn't know what something went wrong. I think it's technical, and I just learned I was muted. Sorry. So I don't know where we stopped, but I just go over again who an observer is. I just said that an observer is a person sponsored by an organization that was accredited by INEC to observe election within the standards and guidelines put in place by INEC and in line with international best practices. Okay. All right. So we were asking ourselves, what is election observation? And as I said earlier on, the president and Mr. Ota had actually told us who an election observer is. I mean, what election observation is also. But for this conversation we're having, we just said that the election observation means the systematic, comprehensive, and accurate gathering of information concerning the electoral process. The second phase of it is that it's an analysis of such information and the drawing of accurate conclusions and offering of relevant recommendations. So the first set of it says, and that is for you as a field observer that will be in the field on 25th of February, that is next weekend, and on the 11th of March. What are you going to be doing? You're going to be conducting a systematic and comprehensive observation of the entire process. Of course, we know when we go along, we'll find out how these processes flow. So you're going to be systematic, you're going to be comprehensive, making sure that you are observing every stage of the process, and then making sure that the information you're gathering is accurate, because at the end of it all, it's going to be analyzed, and then conclusions will be drawn, and the commission certainly will be looking forward to recommendations that will be coming from MBA at the end of the day. So we now go to ask ourselves, why should we observe election? This also has been spoken to, so I will also run through it, because I know basically what we're looking at is the conduct of an election observer, the code of conduct, sorry. So, but I'll run through this. Why do we need to observe election? I just want to reinstate what we had said earlier on. It helps in enhancing public confidence in the electoral process, like the president told us. It helps in promoting transparency, because, of course, by the time the Nigerian populace get to know that, yes, what they are being told, what the result of the election is not just as INEC has said, but that we have unbiased bodies like the MBA that are being in the field, collaborating with what INEC has said, or confirming or not confirming what INEC has said. It helps to promote transparency in the process. We also said that it eases political tension. Why? Because rumors can be carried here and there. People are saying what they want to say sometimes, which might not be true. But when we have observer groups like yours come out to make public statements, explaining what's happened in the field, or trying to, ascertain whether what has been said is true or not, it goes a long way to douse tension in the polity. So election observation is very, very, very important, because words or statements or briefings from you help to douse tension in the polity. We also say it helps to deter improper electoral practices. Yes, because by the time I, as an election officer in the field on election day, by the time I'm carrying out my responsibilities and I realize that I have observer groups or observers, field observers, watching over what I am doing, what does it do? It keeps me in check. And so I behave myself and I do what I am supposed to do. So having you in the field on election day has a way of ensuring that things are done well the way they ought to be done. And we also say it enhances credibility of the electoral process. That has been said, enhances the legitimacy of the electoral outcome. Of course, you know that at the end of the day, by the time the result that will be announced by INEC is confirmed and collaborated by unbiased groups like yours, we know that the winners of the elections will have more legitimacy. And then Nigerians will, of course, believe in the outcome of the election by the time we have reports from you collaborating whatever the commission must have announced. And then we also say it mitigates potential electoral related conflict, just like we said about dousing tension. Election observation also mitigates potential electoral related conflict by the time we have given our verdict at the end of the day. What is the objective, or what are the objectives that this election observation is set to achieve? Of course, because whenever you want to engage in any process, you want to engage or pursue any goal, you must have your objectives that you're set to achieve. so that, of course, when you achieve them, you know, when you don't, you know. So we're saying for election observation, as you go out to the field on the 25th of this month or on the 11th of March, what are you out to achieve? Of course, the first is to conduct a comprehensive analysis of the whole electoral process and offer an impartial, balanced, and informed assessment at the end of the day, assessment of the whole process. And like we said, what we set to achieve, we are set to achieve increased public confidence in the electoral process by encouraging all stakeholders in the election to participate freely and in a conducive environment free of intimidation and violence. What does it also achieve? It helps to identify strengths that we have said, the earlier speakers have told us. It helps to identify strengths, opportunities that, this can be done better, challenges that we encounter that we can find a way out of going forward, weaknesses of the system that can be harnessed into best practices at the end of the day. These are some of the objectives, and of course, finally, to assess the extent to which the electoral outcome reflected the will of the people in line with international best practices. You know, at the end of the day, the important thing that Nigerians want to see is, did their choice, was their choice announced? You know, that's the general and the main thing at the end of the day, the main outcome everybody is looking forward to. Did the commission just announce who they want to announce, or did the people's choice emerge? And by the time observers are in the field on election day, they will actually help to assess to what extent the conduct of the election actually reflected the will of the people. These are the few objectives that we think election observation that you're going to be engaging with will achieve at the end of the day. So what to observe and report on. What are you going to observe? I think this is one of the main things we actually intend to discuss today. What are you going to observe when you get to the field? Some persons will be in the field on 25th, some will be maybe on the 24th, because I know that some of us will want to observe probably the distribution of electoral materials that will commence probably on Thursday before the election. So what are we really going to observe? Whether we're going to be there on Thursday, we're going to be there on Friday or Saturday, what do we want to observe? The first thing we want to observe is the preparedness of INEC to conduct the election. INEC has said it over and over and over again, we're ready, logistics, we're ready with everything we need to do. We're ready to be in the field on 25th. So you're going to be ascertaining where the logistics there, where all the things we ought to do, prepare or get ready, maybe the materials we ought to get to the field, are they there? The sensitive, the non-sensitive, the personnel we claim to have engaged and trained, are they there? The security personnel, are they there? To what extent have we really prepared? What is the level of the preparedness of INEC? That is part of what you're going to be seeing and be observing on that day. Where, of course, we know that it is the practice of the commission that the eve of election, the election personnel within the ward are usually camped in a rack, the registration area center, maybe a primary school or secondary school, preparing them, sharing materials, having refresher courses and enabling them to get to the field early in the morning. All of these things you are supposed to observe and find out, was INEC really prepared? Were these things, were they put in place? Were they really ready for the election? So you're going to be observing the preparedness of election for this preparedness of INEC for this 2023 general election. You're also going to be observing the conduciveness of the environment for all the stakeholders to participate freely without intimidation and violence. Of course, we know what the condition is or what the state of the nation is. But then the commission has been collaborating with security agencies, and they've assured us that they're on the ground. And so we're going to be checking on that day, was the environment conducive for the conduct of election? Was it conducive for all stakeholders to do their job? For the observers, did you have a conducive place to stay? Were you allowed to do your job? So we're going to actually check in the conduciveness of environment, or were PWD is giving the environment to participate in the election. All of these things are going to be assessing on election day. And again, you're also going to be checking the adherence of the commission to the laws, the guidelines, and other norms that we ought to have. Yes, no, this way. Okay. So we're going to be checking whether we adhere to international, continental, regional, administrative norms governing electoral conduct. We're going to be checking that on election day. And then, sorry. Okay. Should move on. Okay. Okay, we're also going to be checking. Can I hide this?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, please. Sorry for the interruption. We're also going to be checking whether or not other election stakeholders acted professionally with respect to their respective tasks. We are the security men there, we are the media people there, all other stakeholders in the electoral process. And of course, observer groups like yours too, were they all there? Were they able to do their jobs well? Did they conduct themselves professionally? Even the election officials, did they do their job as they ought to do? All of these things you're going to be checking on election day, whether all these things were there. And then the presence and role of security officers, we have said that before, is very, very key, that the security officers should be there. And of course, you know, for every polling unit, we should have at least 4 security personnel, just like we're supposed to have 4 election personnel, the presiding officer, and 3 assistant presiding officers on election day for every polling unit. You're going to be checking whether these ones are all there, or whether or not the AMB was autonomous, impartial, and administered the process efficiently without fear and favor. You're also going to be checking that. Did we address all we need to address? Did we attend to all stakeholders and all the contestants the way we ought to do? Were we showing preferences or favoritism to any group? You're going to be checking how far we were impartial in all that we ought to do. And the extent to which the electoral outcome, of course, like we have said earlier on, reflected the will of the people. Now, I want to generally say that the electoral process moves, like I said earlier on, from the time that the election officials get to the field on election day. Usually they're supposed to be there from 7:30, setting up the polling units. So as an observer, you get to the polling unit on election day. You're supposed to check, oh, was the setting okay? Were they 4 officials as they ought to be? Were the materials complete for every of the polling units? You're going to be checking that. Do we have complete set of materials? Because if we have, for instance, in a polling unit, we have 500 voters, the commission is supposed to deploy 500 ballot papers in that polling unit. Okay, the commission is supposed to deploy 1 beavers to that polling unit. The commission is supposed to deploy a whole lot of other materials. So if you are able to get there on time on election day, you should be able to check whether all of these things were there in the right quantity. And again, when you want to start, I'm just saying this generally, when they want to start, you're going to be checking whether the beavers is loaded or not, if you are there on time, whether the ballot box is empty. All of these things we ought to check when we get there on election day. Okay, so, and again, at the end of the polling and counting of results at the polling units, we're also going to be checking whether the results were uploaded using the beavers. I'm sure maybe somebody will take you through what is expected on election day. I don't know about that. But then you're going to be checking whether the election results was uploaded at the polling units, whether the result poster was posted, because every presiding officer is meant to fill a form called EC60E, which is just a copy of the main result sheet, and then pasting it there before they leave the polling unit. So if you're there on election day, you're going to be checking all of this from the very setting up of the polling unit, of the polling unit, to the counting of results and pasting of result sheets, and finally the uploading of the results from each of the polling units. So these are what we expect you to look out for on the 25th of February and on the 11th of March. Now we're looking at the code of conduct for election observers. Having observed the election over and over and over again, I'm sure as members of NBA, we all have this at our fingertips, what we ought to do, how we ought to conduct ourselves, what we ought not to do. So they are just summarized in a few lines this way. We said every field observer is expected to, 1, abide by the laws of Nigeria and INEC guidelines and regulations for conduct of election. Of course, INEC has a guideline 2022. It has issued out the Electoral Act. You as lawyers, I don't need to tell you what the Electoral Act says concerning election, what the Constitution says, what the guideline says. You're going to be finding out whether when we get there in the field as INEC staff or election officials, did we abide by the laws? And you as observers, you're supposed to know all of these things and abide by them. And then again, you're supposed to abide by the guidelines and other terms of references and instructions given to you by your body. That's the organization, the NBA. You know what you ought to do as a lawyer, as a member of NBA. I think I heard your president saying that someone of a group was punished for doing something wrong. Of course, you know, as NBA, you ought to abide by the guidelines and the rules and the laws of the land. So whatever is the guideline of NBA, you're supposed to also abide by it, because remember, when we are looking at who an observer is, we told us it's a person that has been sponsored by an organization. So you must also make sure that you abide by the guidelines of your organization. And thirdly, you are supposed to abide by the principles of election conduct. You know, the principle of integrity, impartiality, transparency, and professionalism. And of course, integrity means that you're true to yourself. If you get to the election, to the polling unit on election day, you are an observer. You're not a polling agent. You're an observer. You're not representing the interests of anybody. You're there to observe the election without bias and report on what you have seen. Impartiality, of course, even if you have any leaning politically, you know that on that day you ought to be impartial, observe the process, not to represent anybody's interest. Transparency, be open with what you do. If you need to ask questions, ask questions. And of course, part of the transparency, we need you to make sure you wear your tag to identify yourself as an election observer anywhere you are. We need you also to ask questions genuinely and not interfere with any of the processes. And we're talking about being professional in what you do. As lawyers, you know how to conduct yourself, you know. There's this particular thing I always want to say. I know lawyers have a level of code of dressing, but we've had 1 or 2 cases where you see observers dress in colors that tilt towards a particular political party, and that brings issues in the field. So we also want you to be professional about even the way you dress on election day, to make sure that you show neutrality in all that you do. So let's be professional in conducting ourselves. Let's be professional in making sure we're taking the notes we need to take, observing what we need to observe, not to concern ourselves with just maybe what is happening around you. Let's be more concerned and professional with observing the process, the conduct of the election is very key. And then, of course, we are also, as observers, you're also supposed to bring irregularities to the attention of election officials. It's part of what you need to do. In as much as we say, do not interfere with the process. If there are irregularities that you note, you have the presiding officer who is in the field, When you see that he's a little less busy, you can approach him, you can bring irregularities to his attention. And then, of course, if you cannot get his attention, on that day, we're going to be having election monitors, election supervisors, 2 key persons who will be there in all the wards. They'll be going around the polling units. So when you note them, of course, they'll be in INEC jackets. You'll see them. You should be able to draw their attention. And if none of them is there, of course, draw the attention of the security personnel to any irregularities. And of course, if all of these do not work, you can always escalate. You can always decide to, refer to whoever your state coordinator is, your local government coordinator, or whoever your line of, depending on your line of communication. But also try as much as possible not to cause any tension, not to disrupt the process, but please draw attention to irregularities that needs immediate attention so that the process can go on well. And then part of also code of conduct, not to hold media interviews within the polling unit. We are lawyers, yes, we know the processes, yes, but please, let's try as much as possible not to grant interviews arbitrarily like that. We expect to hear from NBA as a body at the end of the day. So we would not really appreciate individual observers in different fields saying different things concerning the conduct of the election. I don't think that would be professional. It would be better you pass on, whatever issues you have, whatever thing you think need to be said through the right communication channel that you have within your organization, and then so that we will not say things that will somehow disrupt the process. And then not to handle election materials or interfere in the conduct of poll, counting of ballots, or collation of results. We don't need you to interfere. We've said that over and over again, but we need you to draw our attention where we need things to be done well. But we should be able to draw a line between interfering with the process and drawing attention to irregularities. So these caps of the code of conduct for election observers. So we're going to be looking at rights and privileges of an election observer. We have a lot of rights, we have a lot of privileges, and so I really like you to take note of what you need to do, who you are, what you have access to on election day. First of all, we say you have access to all polling units that you have been assigned to. I'm sure a lot of you will be assigned to particular LGAs, particular LGA. So for whichever LGA you are assigned to, you have access to all the polling units within that LGA. You have access to all the collation centers within that LGA, and of course our INEC offices. So you have your tag that will give you access. You'll be given your ID card that will be giving you access to all the polling units. So nobody will hinder your entry into any of the polling units. And of course, depending on what NBA wants to do, whoever is assigned to be in collation centers, you also be given access to it. Access to official information and right to seek clarification. Of course, if you're confused over anything, before the end of this presentation, I will give us the line of those we need to speak to whenever we have issues, whether at the LGA, states, and all. So you have access to information. Attendance to meetings convened for the briefing of election observers at all states capitals. Yes, for the commission normally does that at all the 36 states and even FCT. We're going to be holding a briefing of observers, I think either on Thursday or Friday or Wednesday before the election. So please be there as an election observer. Is there that you're going to get the information you need to get within the states? Is there you're going to find out whether there are danger zones? Is there you're going to get the number of the security men on ground and the numbers of all the INEC personnel within your state? So that it's very, 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 very key that whatever state you're posted to, you try as much as possible to attend. It's your right to be there at the briefing, to ask questions, to seek clarifications concerning your particular state of posting. The right to observe the entire election process, it is your right, starting from distribution of materials, maybe that will start on Thursday. It's your right to observe all the processes, including distribution of materials, counting of ballots, collation of results, declaration of results. I'm sure NBA is among the few organizations that have been granted access even to the National Collation Center. You'll be sending your representatives there. So you are actually going to be observing the entire, you have a right to observe the entire process. You also have the right, just like I said earlier on, to call the attention of election officials to any observed irregularities, and then communicate with any other person other than the voter inside the polling unit with permission from the presiding officer. The presiding officer, like I said earlier on, is in charge of the polling unit. He is in charge. So if there's anything you need to do, you need to know, it is him, you see. But I always advise, if you need to find out things, please go on time, because sometimes you want to ask them questions and they are under tension. The voters are there, trying to stampede them. And then as an observer, you want to come and say, excuse me first, you know that it won't be good. So if you really need to work, do well, find out, either you go there on time or you check when he's less busy, and then of course you have a chat with him. Is this your right as an observer to communicate with the officers in the field, but not the voter? Please, the voter should not be spoken to for any reason, so that you will not be seen to be influencing his or her choice. Then you have protection and security while on election duty. We said that earlier on. When you wear your tag, you will not be harassed by the police, and nobody will stop you from moving within your local government of deployment. So these are your rights and privileges. And then again, this is just an addition, because we're done with the code of conduct, we're done with what we need to observe. But I just felt, well, as an addition, let me just share with us a few of the forms, essential forms and materials that you need to know, because if you need to report on the process, then you need to know certain basic things. First is the BVAS. We all know BVAS is the in thing, is everywhere, bimodal voter accreditation system. You know, the BVAS is going to be used for accreditation of voters at the beginning of the polling on election day. Every voter that comes to the field, to the polling unit, as once it comes in, is online, and it passes through the APO3, who is checking the line, he goes straight to the APO1. The Assistant Presiding Officer 1 is the one who uses the BVAS, and is supposed to authenticate the voter. What does he do? Of course, you know what he does. He takes the card, the PVC from the voter, the permanent voter's card. He scans it, and then of course he authenticates the voter either by his fingerprints or his facials. Now it's no more like the card reader when it's just the fingerprint. Now the facial is even a lot faster. So it's a bimodal process. It's either with the fingerprint or with the facial. So when it does that and the voter is accredited, again, the BVAS is also used for the upload of results at the end of polling. At the end of polling, when the results have been counted and recorded, the BVAS will be used to upload. Some people are always asking, what if there is issue of network? You know that for accreditation of voters, BVAS does not need network. It doesn't. It is for the upload of result that it needs network. And we have always told us that if there is no network at the polling unit, we can just move around to wherever there is a network, and he will upload the results. That's what the BVAS is used for both the accreditation and upload of results. And we need to also let ourselves know that in this election, on the 25th of February, we're going to be having 3 elections to the seat of the president, the National Assembly, which is divided into 2, the Senate and the House of Assembly. So the results we have the EC8. EC8 series are just our result sheets. So you're going to be having the EC8A. You're going to be, for the president, you're going to be having the EC8 A1 for the Senate, EC8A2 for the House of Reps. And of course, you know it goes that after the polling units, when you get to the RA, that's the word collation, you have EC8B series. It goes on and on, EC8C, EC8D, and all that. So the EC8 series are just our result sheets. We need you to note. And of course, you know that they are specific to, I think it's to the LGA now. So for your own LGA, you need to just check to be sure you have these 3 result sheets on election day for this 25th. You have your the one for the president, you have the one for the Senate, you have the one for the House of Representatives. And then the next thing I need to also note is this form EC60A. The form EC60A is called the PU result poster, the polling unit result poster. Is usually expected of every presiding officer. Every presiding officer, without an exception, that at the end of counting and writing your result sheet on the EC8A, you're supposed to copy out the results after the party agents have signed and all. You copy it out on this form. It's a big form. You copy it out exactly what is in your EC8A to your EC60A and paste it. Every polling unit, it has it. There's none that will say, oh, I was not given. No. So they will paste it. It's just called the people's result. So even if anybody who has voted there can come, the media can snap, everybody has access to EC60A because it's pasted at every polling unit. And then we have the EC40H, is the PWD voter information and statistics. It's the commission is very inclusive in all that it does, so it's taking into consideration the PWDs in every polling unit, in every LGA, and also we have the EC40H for the polling units. You have the 40H1 and all that you have for the LGA and all, but it is a form that is meant for PWDs to record how many of them came to the polling unit, how many, and then of course they are disaggregated. You have those that are maybe for the blind and all of that. So EC40H is meant to be in every polling unit and it's supposed to take note of the PWDs that must have been there to vote. And like I said earlier on, this is also just an inclusion into this, just to let us know that we have some designated spokespersons for the commission. For those of us who are going to be in the headquarters, we already know, I'm sure these are the ones, the headquarters are going to be interacting with your leaders. But at the state level, when you get to the states, you have the resident electoral commissioner. I'm sure most likely, if it's chanced, he will be at the briefing. We have the administrative secretaries. But most importantly, I need you to note the head of Department of Election and Party Monitoring. Election observation is under election and party monitoring as a department. So in all the 36 states of the Federation, we have the HOD EPM. Please, when you get to the state, ensure that you meet with him, ensure that you interact with him, and get his number. Because when you are denied access anywhere or anything goes wrong, you can always dial him. If, for instance, maybe you're within the state capital or something. But he is very, very key. He's one key person that you need to interact with, speak to, because you are working under him as a department. And of course, we have the state HOD for voter education and publicity. He's also there to give you information concerning the election and all the processes. At the LGA, we have the local government electoral officer, who is the head at all the 774 local government areas. We have our offices. We have 774 electoral officers who also attend to you at the level of the local government. And for every local government, you have a staff from the headquarters who is either a supervisor or a monitor. There are always two of them, and they are there. You can always approach them. They will always be dressed in INEC jacket and ID card, so you can approach them. They are there. They are there for you. You have access to information from them. So please approach them. And if you are the polling unit, you can always speak to the presiding officer. He is in charge. But then, like I said earlier on, the headquarters will also be sending an RA, that's registration area or ward by supervisor and monitor. So you also have them. If you can't get access to the presiding officer, you can get access to the supervisor or the monitor who will be there on the election day. Of course, this is just summary of what we have discussed. At the end of the day, we looked at who is an observer. We saw what election observation is, and then we asked ourselves why we must observe election at all, and what objectives we set to achieve. We're set to achieve when we get to the field on 25th and of course on the 11th of March. And when we get to the field, we also ask ourselves, what are we going to observe and report on? We saw that. And of course, the main thing today, what is your code of conduct? How should you behave yourself as a field observer? And we looked at the rights and privileges. Being lawyers, I'm sure you also want, you're keen on what are your rights, what are your privileges as a lawyer, and then as an election observer, sorry. And of course, we looked at obligation resting on all election observers. What are your obligations? And of course, we saw the designated spokespersons for INEC during election. Thank you very much. This is what much I had. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so very much for that prolific presentation. It was very cerebral, and we thank you so much for sharing your wealth of knowledge with us. We would now proceed to the question and answer session. We will now proceed to the question and answer session. Am I audible enough? Just give us a moment.
Okay, so someone said loud and clear. Thank you so much for that beautiful feedback. I mean, this is the whole idea behind having these sessions. So we would proceed immediately to the question and answer segment. I have only observed 2 questions, but the 2 questions seem to be asking the same, to be in the same direction. And so I do not know if you can hear me, Mrs. NKECHI Abuh. I don't know if you can hear me.
I can, sir.
Okay, so we have 2 questions in one because they're headed in the same direction. The question is, can observers or are observers allowed to vote? Are they allowed to carry on, discharge their constitutional duties of voting?
Okay, as a voter?
No, as an observer. Can observers also vote?
Yes, if you're within the place you registered, why not? If you're posted to work at your polling unit, yes. And part of what we tell election officials in our at the eve of the election, we always remind them that if you have voters, if you have observers or party agents who are posted to work within their polling units, they are given priority. They are allowed. They are supposed to vote so that and the first before they continue their work. So you can vote if you are within the local government where you registered. Yes.
Okay, so that was a very apt response. Thank you so much. I think even before now, we had had these questions on the front burner. People wanted to be sure, observers wanted to be sure that while volunteering to serve and give back to this country, that they will be able to also exercise their rights. And so this clears the air. While we wait for the questions, we'll give a little time to just have other people ask whatever questions that they want to ask. There are 3 take-homes for me in the presentation, which, I mean, we all agree that the presentation was very apt. I mean, if it was in a hall, we would be greeted with a standing ovation, I can assure you. So the take-home for me is that we as observers, lawyers, should adhere strictly with the rules of engagement. I think you made that very clear, and honestly, at that point, can and should not be overlooked. So, yes, I saw a question about franchise guaranteed. Yes, the franchise is guaranteed. The second take home is that when all is said and done, nobody is allowed to issue any kind or any form of statement. Only the president should give that. I think we need to remind ourselves about that. So I think that will be that for that, because there are no other questions coming through.